Hello everybody, I'm here today to give you some tips on how to become an effective supply teacher. Throughout my teaching career, I've had spells of supply teaching and I've worked for a number of agencies in different parts of the country. In that time I've learned quite a few tips that I like to share. Tip number one is to register with a number of agencies. I often see on forums questions relating to this saying, should I register with more than one? I would say yes, definitely. At times I've been registered with as many as 5, although in saying that I probably get most of my work from probably 3, but you've always got the other agencies as backup, and you'll find that different agencies go to different schools. So there may be a particular school you like, so therefore you need to register with that agency. What I would say though is always keep the agencies notified of your availability. I used to send emails to each agency covering my availability for 2 weeks. When it changed, I would just send them another email with an update. I never ever said what I was doing, just that I was unavailable. I would suggest that you don't share details of other agencies and schools you work in. So I just keep it quite brief, just to say you're unavailable. Tip number 2 is to have negotiations about your daily pay rate at your interview. Don't accept the first rate they offer. Just a word of warning, I found that rates vary according to where in the country you are. So always check out first what they're going to pay. Tip number 3 is once you're registered, I would do a quick little tour of your area and work out how long it takes you in rush hour to get to those places. So often I would get phone calls from the agencies saying, oh, it's only 5 miles away, but those 5 miles gone across town in the rush hour could take as long as an hour. So be sure you know how long these journeys take. And I would also check out availability of car parking. Don't assume that because there's a staff car park you can use it. I had examples where I was told I could not use a staff car park. I was not staff. I was made to park in a side road quite a long way from the school. I came out and found my car had been damaged. So I learned to always confirm whether I could park in the school car park. Regarding location and school, I used to challenge myself to see how quickly I could make the consultant tell me the school and the year group. And then you can very quickly say yes or no, and you're not missing calls from other agencies trying to phone you. Tip number 4 is pretty obvious, but I'm going to say it. It's be organised. So I always had my work clothes out the night before, my packed lunch made, and my bag packed. Talking about bag packing, I made sure I had a folder of activities for each year group I said I was prepared to teach. I also had some money and some pencils, pens. Make sure you have lots of different coloured pens for marking. Blue tack and pencil sharpeners and Pritt stick were also useful. And also don't forget to pack your DBS and your proof of identity, because often schools will not let you in unless you have this available. Don't assume tea and coffee will be available, even if you're prepared to pay for it. And I would suggest that if there is a little sign saying please pay for tea and coffee, that you do, because I think people in the staff room probably note whether you're contributing or not. But I have known examples where schools are very funny about tea and coffee, and because the permanent staff do not pay into the fund, there's no tea and coffee, and people bring their own. So I got to the stage where I'd always have like a little bit of milk and a tea bag with me. You may find you don't have much time for tea and coffee at break time, because I used to find, quite surprisingly, that the person whose class I was covering, it just so happened to be their play duty. And that happened on quite a regular basis. So just be aware. Tip number 5 is Always try to develop a good working relationship with your teaching assistant, if you're lucky enough to have one, and the business manager. I used to find that teaching assistants would report back. They'd share good things that happened in the day and the not so good things that happened in a day. And they could be the difference between you getting invited back or not. Also, be on good terms with the business manager, because if they get to know you and your name, they will ask for you in person next time they need somebody. Tip number 6 is tricky. I was in a lucky situation where I didn't have to accept any long-term supply. I left my job to do supply because I found the workload too heavy, and I found the agencies were very keen to try to get me back on long-term work. But the problem was, as I think is very often the case, that they were not prepared to offer me my salary. The best I could negotiate was maybe, if I was lucky, £5 a day more. So if you are offered long-term, and I appreciate that some people do need to do that, please check what they're prepared to pay you, because obviously it's a lot more work, it's planning, it's staff meetings, parents' evenings, and you've got to weigh up, are you prepared to do it for maybe no extra or a little bit extra? I was a UPS 3 teacher, that's top of the pay scale, and I was being offered work in very challenging schools for less than what an NQT gets paid. So I always said no, but like I said, I appreciate some people cannot afford to do that, but just be aware. The other thing to be aware of, and it's not related to long-term work, it's short-term, is your availability for the day. Are you prepared to do mornings only or afternoons only? Obviously, if you do this, you lose your potential for pay, because you only get paid pro rata. I eventually said to the agency that I would not accept half days, because I had other agencies prepared to give me full days. So I got to the stage where agencies would say it's a full day's work, and I'd turn up at the school and I'd find it was only for half a day. So I would sort of double check that it is for 4 days. And I found that there were certain schools that would do this a lot. They'd say, oh, well, we've got somebody now internally to cover the afternoon, and wouldn't worry about letting you down. And eventually I sort of struck those schools off my list. Those same schools didn't think anything of booking you for 2 weeks of sick cover, and then phoning up the night before and saying, oh, the teacher's coming back, we got somebody to cover it internally, we don't need you anymore. And in the meantime, I'd turned down lots of work from other agencies. So I would think very carefully about accepting longer term stuff in advance, because it's not unknown for it to get cancelled. If you do choose to do long-term work, I think after 12 weeks of doing the same job, you are entitled to be paid to scale. Just a word of warning, being paid to scale is not portable anymore. So if I was on UPS 3 when I left teaching full-time, it doesn't mean that I would get paid UPS 3 after 12 weeks. It's basically whatever the school would pay to employ that person. So if they feel that an NQT could be doing the job, then they could be prepared to pay NQT pay. So don't assume you will get your last pay salary. Tip 7 is a little bit controversial, and I'm just telling it to you from my point of view. And again, I appreciate that some people have no choice. I would suggest you think very carefully to agreeing to do teaching assistant work or cover supervisor work. I know some of you have to do it, and you have to do what you have to do. This rule seems to have come in recently. I think it's where you're paid to supervise a class, control behaviour, give out work. I don't know about marking. All I know is it's paid a lot less, and from talking around, there seems to be a lot more cover supervisors coming into agencies rather than teaching work. I just think if people keep accepting cover supervisor work when really they are teaching, it's going to drive down supply teachers' pay even more. But obviously some people have no choice, so it's a difficult one, but just something to be aware of. Tip number 8 is general housekeeping, and it's probably things you know already, but I will just run through them. So obviously if you're in primary, always mark the books. You don't need to do deep marking. You may even want to just stamp it to say it's been seen, but you do need to do it or you won't get invited back. Leave the classroom tidy. It doesn't take 5 minutes, just have a tidying round. And make sure you leave a cover note just to say what you've done, those children who excelled at it and those who had difficulties, any behaviour issues, any messages from parents. I mean, as a teacher, if I came back from a day off and the supply hasn't left any notes, I just think it looked as if they didn't care. I always really appreciated it. Tip number 9 is always update your DBS once a year. You can go online to do it on the DBS update site. It works out much cheaper and much easier than having to get yourself a new DBS. And tip number 10 is tricky, but possible, especially if you're known in schools, then to go and see them and try to get yourself on casual contracts. You'll find pay will probably be much better, and you might be able to contribute towards your teacher's pension. When I first started doing supply many years ago, that was how it was. The county would register you and then schools would contact you independently, and you'd get paid to scale and you'd get pension contributions. I hope this has been useful. If it has, please would you subscribe to my channel? It would be really helpful. Bye bye for now.